Chapter 1: Out of a Job. The day was warm but drizzly, typical as summers in London, Ontario go. Of course, the importance of the weather had been reduced by COVID restrictions, and I was inside, as usual, when the message landed in my inbox with an electronic thud. Dear students, faculty, and staff, since the pandemic began, we've worked hard to make the best decisions to protect everyone in the Huron community. We make those decisions based on the best information we have before us. Right now, we are seeing an alarming rise in the number of COVID-19 cases caused by the Delta variant. At the same time, vaccine supply has increased across Canada, a key line of defense of staving off the virus. Given this information, we've made an important decision alongside Western University and our affiliate partners to keep everyone safe. As part of a new vaccination policy, all students, staff, and faculty will be required to demonstrate proof of vaccination prior to arriving on campus. Those who cannot provide proof of vaccination will need to complete COVID-19 testing twice weekly. Western's Vaccination and Testing Center is open and available to all university community members, meaning you will be able to access testing and Health Canada-approved vaccination should you need them. Let me be clear, vaccination is the single most important thing we can do to keep our campus safe. I strongly encourage everyone in our community to get vaccinated if you are able. At Huron, we are driven to produce leaders with heart, who are aware of and attuned to their communities and their place within them. This is a chance for us to come together and lead by example. I thank you for your continued patience in this dynamic situation. I look forward to seeing you on campus in September. Sincerely, Dr. Barry Craig. Craig is the president of Huron College, the original college of what is now Western University. At its foundation almost 170 years ago, it was a theological school, and it has maintained its focus on philosophy ever since. Huron is where I spent some of my time as an undergraduate, and where I later taught as a professor of ethics and ancient philosophy. I taught students critical thinking and the importance of self-reflection, how to ask good questions and evaluate evidence, how to learn from the past, and why democracy requires civic virtue. The email landed with a thud, but it wasn't a total surprise. For many months, the academic community across the country had been discussing and debating what an in-person return to classes in the fall of 2021 might look like. Teaching had been exclusively online since the pandemic tightened its grip almost a year and a half earlier. And because of my own focus on medical ethics, I had been thinking and reflecting on the ethical dimension of the pandemic response for some time. As an ethics professor, I studied the history of vaccines and the mandates that sometimes accompany them. I knew that mandates could happen quickly, so I expected that once COVID became a global phenomenon in early 2020, vaccination was probably going to be the proposed way out. And once vaccination was the proposed way out, it seemed likely that mandates spanning at least the healthcare and education sectors would follow. I was further convinced this would happen because our governments, over the past few years and especially in the West, have enacted policies under the guise of safety and protection. Its genesis may have been the Patriot Act and its brethren in a post-9/11 world. However it began, we now seem to acquiesce in policies that grant the state a heavy hand. And that trend was made even worse in my own context at the university, where just a few months earlier a new board of governors was appointed consisting largely of big business figures. A corporate mindset and a forum for free and honest debate do not often coexist peacefully. 5 days after the directive from Huron was sent, I summarized why I didn't agree with it in an email back to Craig. The details of my objection will fill many subsequent pages of this book, but in short, the foundation of my argument rested on both scientific and ethical grounds. It begins, my primary concern is that the vaccination mandate is not clearly based on evidence-based scientific research, and it violates Canadian human rights law and ethical principles. Where the general health of society is at high risk, the limitations on human rights may be justified, but this case presently cannot be made in the situation of COVID-19. This is especially in view of the very low risks of hospitalizations and deaths with COVID-19 at this time, the widespread voluntary vaccination and naturally acquired immunity in the population, and the availability of a wide range of counteractive treatments. Please consider what I offer below as an opportunity to rethink Huron's vaccination policy and as an opportunity to engage in a dialogue about these very important issues. In one of the final paragraphs, I wrote, "In conclusion, the administration of a vaccination is defined as a medical procedure. The courts have established jurisprudence on informed consent requirements for medical procedures. Furthermore, inquiring into the vaccine status of a student or an employee is a breach of medical privacy, as outlined in the Personal Health Information Protection Act in Ontario, for example. And forcing them to choose between a vaccine and their right to attend school, or take part in certain activities on school grounds, amounts to coercion." The August 16th email was more than 2,400 words long. It included 24 footnotes, most of which point to government sites, official documents, and peer-reviewed research. And I signed it as both an instructor in Huron's philosophy department and as the chair of the Ethics and Law Committee of the Canadian COVID Care Alliance, CCCA. It was met with silence. The silence from both the administration and my colleagues was both insulting and belittling. In the true spirit of the Academy, I had expected, maybe hoped for is more accurate, a response along the lines of, "Thank you very much for your concerns. I know this is important to you, especially given that this is one of your areas of study. We value your input." Even if the decision stood, was it too much to expect something like, "We've weighed all the evidence. We've decided to go in a different way"? Instead, the responses I was getting, few as they were along the lines of, "Well, we're just following Health Canada." When you have a top-down imposition of a mandate on an institution which is supposed to be founded on the idea of free thought and open discourse, and you allow no bottom-up questions or discourse from the members of that community, worries arise for me about the integrity of the process. In the meantime, I hadn't even started preparing for the fall academic session. Normally, professors will order textbooks for their fall classes in June or July. But given the uncertainty over the summer and now facing the possibility that I may not be able to teach at all, I put my setup on hold. It proved to be prescient. I continued my work with the CCCA, publishing pieces on informed consent, the legal limits of mandates, and the uncertainty around vaccine effectiveness. None of this was getting much traction. I sat down with the CCCA's communications team to ponder what we should do next. We asked, what can we do to bring more attention to this? My communications with Huron College seemed an obvious place to start. We decided to record a video with me outlining my stance and thought processes, and the implications for me and for the wider public debate about our COVID response if I did indeed lose my job over my decision. We recorded the video in the first week of September and published it on the CCCA's Instagram account and a few other platforms. Despite some platforms removing the video after deeming it misinformation, it went viral. The Instagram post alone has generated more than 1.1 million views, and it has become a lightning rod for both supporters and detractors. One of the most discussed aspects of the video is the fact that I displayed emotion, normally a valuable currency in the social media world. There is a moment in the latter half of the video, which runs just under 5 minutes long, where I frame a question for my putative fall class. This is my first and potentially my last lesson of the year. I said it haltingly because tears began to well up. I regained some composure to finish out the video, and as I finished, a rush overtook me, and I started to cry quietly. One of our communications people said, "Oh, I'll edit that out because I don't want you to have to be crying on camera." Then another said, "I think it actually shows the human toll of all of this." We left it in, for better or worse. On the worse end, I struggle with its inclusion because philosophical analysis should be based on reason and not emotion. It also opened me up to accusations of crocodile tears, manufactured to generate sympathy. Around the same time the video dropped, Huron College announced it was amending its initial vaccination directive. I'm not implying any causal connection. It read in part, "Effective September 7th, 2021, all members of our community, including students, employees, and visitors, must provide proof of vaccination or have an exemption. And those with an exemption must be tested for COVID-19 twice weekly. There is no longer a testing option for those who choose not to be vaccinated." I thought it was an odd deletion. If the concern about my vaccine refusal hinges on the danger I could pose as a viral vector, it seems an offer to remove myself physically from the classroom. Even the campus as a whole would be a reasonable measure. We had just lived through more than a year of precedent by teaching online. We already had an administrative apparatus in place to support the strategy. In fact, the class I was scheduled to teach in the fall was business ethics, one that I'd taught online many times. Despite my preparatory procrastination, it was practically ready to go, either in person or online. But even though the one allowance that might make it possible for me to teach the fall term had been removed, I still had heard nothing specific to my circumstances from anyone at the college. Then an email arrived from Huron's provost and dean of arts and social sciences, Jeff Reed, which made it clear the train had left the station and was picking up speed. He asked pointedly, referring to the August 16th email, "Can we assume from this that you won't comply?" The question didn't even take up one line on my screen. What I was preparing for mentally was to talk to the dean and the chair of my department about possibly revisiting the remote teaching option. But the tenor of the email told me the situation had escalated beyond a simple conversational remedy. My emailed response was short as well, barely 200 words. From an ethical perspective, I knew it was important for me to be ethically transparent in my thinking. Whether that's legally smart, I'll leave for others to decide. So I was clear. I would not comply with any aspect of the mandate. I would not submit proof of vaccination. I would not submit to a rapid test. I would not mask in the classroom. I waited less than 24 hours for the response. On September 16th, as I anticipated, Huron College terminated me with cause. I was dismissed for doing exactly what I had been hired to do. I was a professor of ethics, questioning what I view as an unethical demand. You don't have to look hard to see the irony. Chapter 2. About Me.